This is TV Podcast Industries, and we're talking about Star Trek Picard Season 2, Episode 8, Hide and Seek. Welcome back, fellow Trekkies, Trekkers, everything in between. In the immortal words of some song, I'm going to get it out there really early. Hey, La Sirena. All right. Hey. Yes, you are listening to TV Podcast Industries, and we're talking about Star Trek Picard Season 2, Episode 9, Hide and Seek. I'm one of your hosts, Chris, and I'm joined by the illustrious crew of TV Podcastica. Yes, we are here. It sounds like a ship. I'm trying to turn TV Podcast Industries into a ship, but it doesn't really work. TV Podcastica, I think, is probably something as well.
It is, yes. That's Jason Kabasi's podcast network, Podcastica. Jason Kabasi, who joined us for one of our podcasts before. That's why I've heard it. But I am one of your other hosts, Derrick, and I'm really sorry to our fellow Trekkies and Trekkers for putting Macarena into Chris's head just before we started recording.
Hey, La Sirena. All right.
Sorry.
Hello there, fellow Trekkies and Trekkers. I am one of your other hosts, John.
Yes, much like the Borg assimilation, I am back for this episode.
Yes. Welcome back. The penultimate episode of Star Trek Picard Season 2. There are only 3 seasons of this show, as we know, so not many episodes overall left. Only 11 episodes left of the show overall, so we're way more than halfway through and going into the end of this season as well.
Yes, we certainly are.
It feels quite like we're going into the end of a mid-season arc. Anyway, we have lots to discuss on this episode, where we feel as we get into the end of this season. Literally, we are less than an hour away from the end of Season 2, and I have thoughts.
Your maths is so weird. You've done this before on Moon Knight as well. I love the way you consider we're only an hour away when we've got a week left to wait for it and a podcast to record about it. And we're only an hour away from the end of the season.
An hour of viewing of content.
I know. It just it always catches me by surprise when you say something like that. Because I'm like, but we have a whole week full of hours to wait for the end of the season.
Much like many great authors of the yesteryear, I am great with words and soliloquies and everything, and the narrative structure and form of. I'm not great at talking. No, not soliloquies, especially in the
There
morning.
You go. I love that you got soliloquies right the second time you said it.
Yes, exactly. But I'm good with the prose. It's just not when it comes to mathematics and the definition of the universe and time and space. Things get timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly. But we're not here to talk about timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly and everything in between. We're here to talk about Star Trek. We are here to talk about this penultimate episode, Hide and Seek. So, gentlemen, I think we should just jump straight in. First up, as always, Derrick, do you want to tell us who gave us what?
Absolutely. This episode was written by Matt Okumura and Chris Derrick. Matt was a story editor on this season of Picard and previously wrote an episode of Smallville way back in 2003, which I thought was really fascinating. It's been a long time since he has an episode credit. Chris Derrick is a staff writer on this season of the show, and this is his first episode credit for Star Trek Picard.
Was this a joint writing sort of thing for you and Chris?
It was. It's our pen name.
Let's see whether we did a good job with our discussion by the end of the episode. The episode was directed by Michael Weaver. His first Star Trek episode. Previously done lots and lots of TV shows, including The Midday Project, Good Girls, and Little Fires Everywhere as well. Lots of drama and comedy in there.
Interesting. That is actually that is interesting.
Yeah. John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with your synopsis for the penultimate episode of Star Trek Picard, Season 2, Episode 9, Hide and Seek?
Sure. The Borg Queen, Soong, and the drones beam to La Sirena, while Picard, Tallinn, Raffi, and Seven beam to Chateau Picard, and are joined by Raffi, Teresa, and Ricardo, who have escaped La Sirena. Surrounded by drones, the group are pinned down. In the ensuing gunfight, Rios is injured and is transported along with Teresa and her son to safety at Tallinn's apartment. Agnes's consciousness blocks the Queen from the ship's systems and stalls her using a fractal lock in the form of an Elnor security hologram. Having split up to get to La Sirena, Seven and Raffi arrive at the ship and try to use the ship against the Queen, but Seven is mortally wounded. Meanwhile, back in the chateau, Picard and Tallinn escape from Soong and the drones in the tunnels beneath the house. Picard recalls his mother having a mental break while they were playing hide-and-seek in the tunnels when he was a boy, after which she ended her own life. Discussing this with Tallinn helps Picard come to terms with it, but Soong catches up with him and corners them in the conservatory where Picard's mother killed herself, but Rios beams back and forces him to flee. Back in La Sirena, with Seven bleeding out, Agnes pleads with the Borg Queen to save Seven and to have compassion. Agnes convinces her to build a new, more resilient Borg collective through salvation rather than assimilation, to truly become a new Borg Queen. The new Queen heals Seven by adding her to the collective and then departs in La Sirena for the Delta Quadrant, leaving a message for Picard. There must be two versions of Renee, one who will fly the Europa mission and one who will die.
Yes, and I guess we'll find out what that means next week. That's kind of the cliffhanger of the episode, what does that message mean from the Borg Queen to Picard, right?
Yeah.
And only one man can solve that riddle.
Exactly.
The riddle.
Jean-Luc.
Oh, sorry.
That's it. I was just wondering whether this was almost like the creation of the mirror universe or something, that there's the two possibilities. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I sort of felt it might go, but who knows?
Yeah, it's an interesting cliffhanger to leave on, especially when you've essentially potentially rewritten the history of the Borg. Now,
Yes,
for all that is, and all that can ever be going forward of the Star Trek universe.
yes.
Okay, they're effectively saying you have to create this fork in the road where both the good thing happens and the bad thing happens to enable this situation to happen. Is that what it is? Because the Borg Queen wouldn't have been able to come back here if that timeline hadn't been created.
Yeah, exactly.
And they need to restore the original timeline to get back to the future of the Federation.
Yeah.
So maybe it's
And
that.
it also, as well, does confirm the theory we had earlier on in the series that the steampunk Borg Queen is Agnes.
Yes.
Is this Bugatti, I guess.
Borgatti. Oh, I like
Bugatti.
it. Yes, I like it.
Oh my God, she is the car?
Kind of, yeah, exactly.
She actually is the car. She just say she's a transformer now. That's it. She just kind of goes over and turns into a really high-end sports vehicle and then comes back up as a machine.
Yeah.
But we are kind of jumping to the end of the episode. Let's get back to our normal structure and normal points of the episode. Let's start with our small moment or general order for the episode.
Yeah, no, I'll kick off. It's just the visual, to be honest. I loved the visual of all the Borg drones kind of transporting into the vineyard to surround the chateau.
Yeah.
Where Picard and the gang are sort of have transported to as well.
Yeah.
I found it a little weird that they weren't transported to La Sirena for some reason. I'm not too sure why that happened, but I know, they've had a bit of a faulty power issue going on with the ship. I just really liked the pan back that showed all these Borg drones transporting in and then just the laser sights that are green.
Yes.
Instead of red, just gradually coming on and focusing on the chateau. I just thought that was a really classy image.
It was, wasn't it?
And
Yeah.
shot that was done.
Yeah.
It really gave that sense of them sort of being pinned down and surrounded. So that's basically my very small point.
Yeah.
I just thought it was a nice establishing shot. I thought it was classy. and just that blacking, the darkness of the night with all these laser sights firing up from the Borg drones.
Yeah, and I love it as well because you're so used to Borg drones from right back to Star Trek Next Generation when they were first introduced, that idea of that laser sight going through kind of a foggy or misty thing. It's just one of those cool things that clearly someone in the special effects department or the background team thought this is look cool coming out of the darkness, this red light through a foggy scene, and now we have it with the green laser sights. It took me a second to realize what was happening. I thought they'd all become proper Borg drones, exactly like we've seen in the past, but this is just the laser sights on their guns replacing the red sight. But they're transported into the vineyard to protect the outside of the La Sirena, but we do see a few Borg going aboard with the Borg Queen aboard La Sirena.
Absolutely. Yeah. And interestingly as well with this, because, we're so used to Borgs adapting to modulate or modify in response to phaser fire.
Yes.
But I guess a bullet to the brain, you can't really modulate against that.
Well, they're modulating shields, so I presume the shields would block a bullet.
That's true.
If they eventually get to that point where they're able to.
But they're not able to.
But they don't have that yet. They don't have that technology yet. This is just really basic Borg drones. They have no augments really, other than what's been transferred in by the Borg Queen to them at the end of the last episode.
So on this one, I thought it was really cool. I loved it. I loved the green, blah, blah, blah. The one I did was just like, but why did she, like, when she took over her code for the transporter, she just, like, did the customization that, like, she pimped out her transporter just with the green? And then, because the same way Laris has the smoke transporter, it's just like it's an extra detail like that. You just kind of customization that you buy, like when you kind of a premium bit when you upgrade.
Oh, you do that if you're a coder, Chris. You make sure that code is representative of who you are as the coder that did it. You got to leave your stamp behind on it.
I was just like, that was the only. I was like, okay, so she has control and it's great. I was like, okay, I get it that it's literally green Borg. I understand that. It was just like, yeah, but she doesn't have, like, it's not a Borg system yet. It's still the La Sirena's transporter. I was like, okay, I get it. But
anyway. we did see that when Jurati put the code in, or Jurati possessed by the Borg Queen originally, we saw her put the code into La Sirena to take over it, and we saw the systems change at that time to kind of reflect this Borg coming in. Yeah, no, I get that. But yeah, overall establishing beautiful shot to kind of see there. And wow, does she have a lot more troops than she had at the end of last episode?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And now again, we've talked about it before. Clearly, COVID played a part in quite a lot of the filming of this show. So when we saw 3 or 4 people at the end of last episode, I think it was 6 troops or 7 troops we saw there. That's supposed to represent that she had an army of troops, but clearly it's much easier to represent that during COVID filming with a few lights out in the field saying there's 50 or 60 troops here, so clearly that's the way they've done it.
Yeah, no, and it looked cool. I have to say, like, it didn't look too CGI'd, which I did fear. And with some of the shots previously, kind of because it's that dark, it's dark France, and you can kind of get away with it. I thought they'd just kind of overkill it, but no, it overall looked pretty nice. I'm going to move on and jump in at this point into kind of what my kind of point on this one, which was, I think the World War II tunnels and the secret entrance that still works these years later since World War II. So we'll say like 70 years maybe, since the creation. And then Picard's very strange narrative around explaining the World War II. Also, there's live ammunition in there, by the way. Did anyone see that?
Yeah.
Yep.
There's still a load of rockets. I was there's rocket propelled grenades, like just sitting there on the shelf. I was like, yeah, he picked up a gun, but didn't pick up the big rocket propelled grenade, which would have been so much more like action hero Picard.
That
just like pick it up.
Yeah, that doesn't feel like Picard though, doesn't it?
No, I think
a Luger or a small gun feels like Picard.
I think if The Rock played Picard, then he probably would pick up the The RPG.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yes.
Well, that would be a very different show, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
But of course the entrance still works, because the entrance works when his mother uses it a couple of 100 years later. So of course that little ability where they twist the side of the library bookcase
Yes.
and it opens the door. Yeah, this is what you're going to have in your house, Chris, isn't it?
It is. I have always wanted a secret bookcase door.
Yeah.
It's something that's always just lived in my brain rent free. And when I saw this, I was like, oh yeah, I really want
Perfect.
this.
That'd be perfect.
And it would be amazing.
Yeah. But there is that weird moment, isn't there? Like we were talking about it before we started recording. There is that weird moment where Tallinn says to Picard, "What is this place?" Because she's seen it when she was inside his mind, and she knows exactly what this place is, but she needs to know from Picard the detail behind it, effectively. She's been in this location in his mind. And Picard goes, these were World War II tunnels where they stored loads of ammunition. And she's kind of going, that's not what I meant, Picard. Give me the detail of this story that we've been trying to uncover for days now. But it is a really odd moment, I thought.
It felt like somebody in the writers' room had spent a lot of time researching the historical aspect of understanding in France during World War II how they could have this bunker and these tunnels, and they were like, "I'm going to put this research to use."
Absolutely,
God
this is
damn it.
going in the episode, even if it doesn't matter. And I suppose you could probably say Picard doesn't want to talk about this situation. Picard wants to hide this situation in his mind, so it's a way of keeping it off for a little bit longer, I suppose.
No, 100%. It was a very noticeable, what the, huh? Yeah. And it, as you explain, that is the reason, and that is, you understand that, but it's just much more fun to think that some, young, writing assistant, well, I done all this work, can I at least just get something in here? But it looked cool, and these are things that did happen, and there are still those tunnels in France across the kind of countryside. So I like that they have incorporated this quite well, and how it looked, and there was still a functioning weapon down there for him that allowed him to escape.
Exactly.
What about yourself?
My small moment from the episode, just because I want to keep this as small and short as possible, is just Rios' side of the story, because we're still getting the love story with himself and Teresa. It's another one of those weird ones. He's supposed to be our action hero character for the show. That's what he's always felt like. And he's the first one shot, transported away, and then locked away with Teresa and her son, so they can have their moment where she says to him what we know has been going through the storyline since the beginning of the season. What if your future Rios is here in 2024 and not back where you live, where you're a captain of a starship with loads of crewmates? They are building this up, that this is what's going to happen. And by the end of the episode, they have no way back home, I suppose. But Rios does shut it down. He says, I'm here to protect the future. I'm here to make sure the future is safe for you and your son and everybody here on Earth. I did like the idea that at least it's coming through, that she really wants him to stay. I liked the way Teresa said, there's enough heroes in the future, you can stay with me. You know, that it's kind of coming through a little bit more, that this relationship is a bit more meaningful. But I'm done with this. We need to move on, because we've known that this is where the storyline was going with them since the first introduction of Teresa. Yeah, no, I'm in agreement to this.
It's sweet, it's fun, it's slightly overplayed. It's it's now about 3 scenes too many. And because they're saying the same thing, that cute 2 episodes ago, last episode, where we're on La Sirena and they had the cafe scene. It was cute, cutesy. Tell me your husband were about to have, I wanted an affair. It's cutesy in a very weird way.
Yeah.
But it's cutesy. That's all you need. It should, even that felt a bit over, but it was just okay, well, you're telling it in you're giving the kid cake. I get it. Fine. We're down. Okay. Now we're moving on, because she got the kiss.
Yeah.
And then we got this one, and it was the secondary, and it was as he transports away, even with the I'm going to stay. I love you.
Yeah.
And then he goes, and now he's straight back again, and he's like, nope, I'm back to the mission at hand. And you're like, oh, God
But not only that, he transported away to go back and save La Sirena, to continue on with his mission, effectively saying, goodbye, I'll never see you again. La Sirena's gone, so he's going to see her again in episode 10. So they've done this twice now. Last episode, as you say, that moment with the cafe was her saying goodbye. I need more information for my mind to remember you well. Then he sees her again this episode and does the same thing. And then next episode, clearly he's going to be going, well, I have no shit now. Can I borrow your car? Or something.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, personally, for me, this is like, firstly, why wouldn't Teresa want to just go into the future, quite frankly? It'd be a damn sight easier without ice and all that nonsense.
Absolutely. And she can clearly use all the medical equipment as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, she took to the tricorder like a duck to water, which was interesting.
Yeah.
Like
a doctor to medical equipment, yes.
But I mean, for me, just very quickly, because I don't really want to dwell on it either. I mean, and maybe I'm just going to be a little brutal, but I just feel like Rios totally underserved in this series. It's a real shame. I think it really shows, I think you mentioned it, Derrick, and when I thought about it, that this was their bubble for the filming, was these three characters primarily, where, you know, he's been kept separate from Raffi and Seven and Picard and all that. You know, you think of the relationship he had with Agnes, and that could have just been explored so much better with her being the Borg, you know, with this Bugatti at the moment. And I mean, the only thing I'd say is I do like you mentioned just before, Derrick, I like the fact that, you know, there is that moment where it's about the future or staying in the past for that. But I just feel it could have been done just all together. I think this series has just split this group way too much for me. And I loved their cohesiveness in the first series.
Absolutely.
And that's what I've kind of missed here, to be honest. The group dynamic of these. It comes in sporadically, but to me, Rios has just been totally underserved. And this whole bit is, has just been drawn out or just structured in a way that feels totally isolated from anything else going on, and a little bit forced, quite frankly.
And you know what's even more annoying? Santiago Cabrera, who plays the role of Rios, he played 5 characters last season.
Yep.
Didn't he? He was four holograms and Rios. Like, that's how much he was able to do on the show last season and much he's contributed. And this season it has literally just been running around with this woman from 2024 and declaring whether he's in love with her or not, or whether he wants to stay in this time or go back to being the captain of a starship. Remember, that's his job in the future. He's the captain of a starship with a whole crew dependent on him. And it's whether he'll stay back here in 2024. That side of it doesn't seem to come out at all. It's really just whether he wants to stay with his this new woman or not. But he's got such a big role in Starfleet in the future, and it's not being put on screen. And he's such a good actor, they're giving him practically nothing to do.
And I mean, you know, given what has been discussed previously, it's like he has no identity papers. He's got no birth certificate. He can't prove any of his existence. So she's asking him to stay on. So he's eternally being chased by ice and possibly deported. You know, with the exception of forged documents. I get it, they do that, but I just feel like I think the biggest thing for me on this point was when he came in and saved Picard and Tallinn right at the end, and he says a thank you would have been nice. And I think that is the thing for me, is that Picard, this charismatic leader, which we saw with him in with Rene at the gala, and yet it feels like there's a gulf has developed between Picard and this new crew in this season, because it says a thank you would have been nice. It's all, you know, whereas at the start of it, he was, you know, him and Picard were just felt closer, and it feels like there's been this drift. And of course, I just don't see that playing out as to the implications of that, which, if it had done, that would at least serve what I'm feeling from this. So,
Yeah, it's a tough one, and I think as we wrap up this season, I think we'll be able to kind of dive a lot more into the whys and what and the hows, because Rios said Picard was like a father figure to me. A strange father.
Yeah.
But let's move on to like some of the other points on this episode. So should we move on to our Omega directive, the medium moment?
Well, for me, I'll kick this off, and one of the other things I really enjoyed about this, because I've missed the presence of Elnor, is getting holographic Elnor. I love this whole thing, where it came from with Agnes, using him as a fractal key to lock the Borg Queen out of La Sirena, to effectively stall her rather than to stop her.
Yeah.
I just thought this was really good, having him back. You got the action of him taking out the two drones really efficiently with the gun. Hence why I was asking about the gun, whether, potentially, they could modulate so that, a physical bullet wouldn't be an issue for them.
Yeah.
But he finds his sword as well from his
so
quite
cool.
a lot.
Love that.
Time, which was just great. He himself is playing hide and seek on La Sirena, to dodge the Borg Queen. Does a great takedown of the remaining drones with his sword before sort of doing the hero leap off the sort of mezzanine part of the ship.
You realise how much you miss him when he's on screen.
Yeah, exactly. Really, really good. I know it's your point, but let alone the relationship with Raffi as well, that aspect of this. So I just really kind of was glad to see fractal holographic Elnor back here, even though he does get sort of phased out by the Borg Queen at the end.
Really quickly, unfortunately. No, I love the little touches here. I mentioned in the first point a minute ago about Rios and how many characters he was playing last season, all emergency holograms. We have Elnor here as the emergency combat hologram, so I like, again, this callback to season 1 of Picard, that La Sirena is equipped to effectively crew its entire ship full of different types of holograms. So that's a nice little touch back to season 1. Elnor's great, though. Really, really, really like him here. There's also the fact that he's a hard light hologram as well. We saw in the first episode, we saw the tactical version of Rios, who was in the fight, who was able to be soft light, where things would pass through him and then turn to hard light, so that he could hit someone in the face effectively. So this version of Elnor is much more realistic, and he has the armband, like the emergency medical hologram on Voyager had, to show that he can get on and off the ship if needs be. So I love their little touches there. So they're very good at making sure that this stuff all fits with how Star Trek works, of course.
Yeah. And I think the other interesting thing was that he came back as a holographic security officer, and in that flashback from one of the previous episodes where Raffi has that flashback to her and Elnor discussing about whether he would go back to the Quat Malot for a year rather than Starfleet, he mentions he doesn't feel the security officer is something for him. So I kind of like that little touch.
Yeah. Very cool.
I loved Elnor. I loved, like, we said we haven't really got the action hero that is Rios. So we got this kind of young, kind of ass-kicking Elnor. And I've missed him throughout this kind of season, because he's the ass kicker. He can kind of, like, we saw him in episode 2, when they were in the Confederation, kind of that fantastic scene with him and Rafi in the, trying to take down the shield, where he's like taking the beating, and then she's like, okay, go do it. And he's like, his smile, just beam goes on his face.
Yeah.
And you see it do it this hide and seek. Let's play hide and seek. Yeah. Which Riley says. And he like goes, all right, let's have fun. Because you can have that with this character. So when they brought him back as a hard light, and like you said, he had the armband, I went, oh, cool. So we're losing Jurati for the next few bits. So then they're going to give us Elnor back now as a hard light kind of hologram who can kind of grow as this hologram piece and we're gonna get him over the next couple of episodes, maybe into next season. I was like, cool. That's a nice way to kind of, you lose him, but you bring him back in a different way because you've lost this other character. Nope. He is now on, unless he is going to be an additional character for Jurati in the future, if we see Jurati as a point of view for her as this new Burgati going forward. But I don't think it's going to happen. So I was a bit like, oh, so it's this wetting your whistle. It's just like giving you this taste of something, and you're like, oh, I like what you're doing here. Exactly. It's fun. And then they just kind of went, no, that's something that's sidelined for something different coming forward.
Well, that's it. I mean, because ultimately as well, Elnor's physical body has just been gone. And so I'm wondering, are we going to get Borg Elnor or something as well?
No, he's already dead. So.
I know he is, but you never, I mean, I just don't know what is going to happen here because it's Star Trek. I mean, like, there's part of me thinking, so is that Elnor absolutely gone? Are they going to be able to do a holographic, as you say, in season 3, just because the data is somehow there in the system? Will the Borg have done something that brings him back to life? Because, Borg Queen can do some pretty nifty stuff. And given him the choice, to be saved or to
stay dead or come back as Borg, basically.
Come back as Borg or something like that. And are we going to get some kind of Borg Elnor? Maybe I would guess something a bit more Borgified, like Seven, with sort of minimal implants or something. I just don't know.
Could be.
It seems otherwise. It does feel like that's it with Elnor.
Yeah, he could have been the Rimmer of this crew from
exactly
like Red Dwarf. Yeah. He could have been the one
awesome.
trying to understand how he can live his life as a hologram when he gets flipped on and off at the end of each day or something to save power. So it could have been that, but just for you Red Dwarf fans out there. But there are two reasons that Elnor is brought back here, John. You talked about one of them, the fact that he's this kick-ass fighter protecting the ship and keeping this fractal key away. My medium moment from the episode, actually the other side of it, his conversation with Raffi. It's the other reason he's brought back, because Picard is a really hopeful show. There's always moments of hope. There's always moments where characters are able to develop and learn from their past. And I really like this because Raffi, this whole arc of the death of Elnor has been really weighing on Raffi since he died back at the start of the season. We've learned that she pushed him into staying close by her side, that she pushed him into going to Starfleet Academy when he wanted to go back and join the Shatvash. And here she gets a moment where she's able to confront him with that and apologize to him, even though it's not really Elnor. And that's all for her own self-healing before she has to go and effectively help Seven and heal Seven.
Yeah.
She's able to kind of self-heal. And I really like the scene. I know some people don't like shows that are positive all the time, but this is something that's fundamental to Star Trek and something that's fundamental to Picard. So you kind of have to have this moment where if you're never going to see Elnor in the show again, if that's the case, you have to give Raffi some closure. And the closure was done really well. I loved having Elnor say to her, even though I'm not Elnor, I'm just a hologram. I'm back here for this purpose. Yeah. I did live the last breath of your Elnor, and I know it was full of love and no blame towards you. And I think it was a lovely moment. Really, really well played.
That was really, really touching. It was really good. And I think, I think the positivity though is in Star Trek. It's not trite. It's not just sugary
greed
stuff. It's generally positivity through adversity or challenge or difficulties, which it is kind of, it's that positivity. So it doesn't come from a place of just pure that nothing is ever wrong.
Exactly.
It's not a utopia. It comes from where people do lose people that they love, or they do things wrong, but their growth or their development is through how they approach that, to rectify it or to learn from it, and that positive message in that. And here it's Raffi, wanting to own what she feels, not necessarily what Elnor feels, to at least offer that apology, to make that, and to have that conversation so that she can move forward, and in the knowledge that she's been open with Elnor.
Exactly.
And I just thought this was really, really good.
Yeah, loved it.
For me, it was a nice emotional foil to this episode, in that it was that beat that has been slowly building for the beat, the growth, the final, as you said, the final crescendo of the story of Raffi for this.
Yeah. It's been going throughout the season, right back from episode 2, so yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, you could even argue episode 1, where it is Picard, where we see Raffi and Elnor in Starfleet. And she is kind of talking, I'm so proud of you, you're about to go beam up to his first kind of post after graduating. So it started all the way back then, and it's been great to see. That sounds quite evil, that it's been great to see this downfall of Raffi and then this growth and this forgiveness. But I suppose, look, that's what we're here for. It's story, tragedy, and character growth.
Yeah.
So yeah, and look, I did really enjoy this kind of aspect, this finale, if you will.
Exactly. And if you're going to bring Elnor back, you bring him back for these two big things. You bring him back to be the action hero that we've missed, and to resolve that Raffi storyline so she can move on and provide support for Seven the way she does as well.
Yeah, no, agreed.
How about yourself, Chris? What's your medium moment for the episode?
I'm going to talk about Soong's slow, inevitable crawl to greatness. His march to greatness. It's basically him slowly kind of playing hide and seek with Picard and the rest of the folks, and chasing Picard until we get him at the Rios's saving moment, and with it. So I did really enjoy this. It is a very Terminator-esque kind of story beat, where it's this just inevitable man just coming to kill your kind of, or destroy your kind of, your hero of the story. So we see him chase Picard, but we also see him just do that Brett Spiner-esque kind of, it's just pure Brett Spiner coming through it, where it's just this sleazy song kind of, not even sleazy, it's this, I'm grasping at the word here, where it's just, he's chewing scenery to a large bit here.
Oh yeah.
Where it's just kind of him really kind of pulling, kind of, I'm going to get you no matter what you say. I'm going to be this greatness. I'm going to be this amazing character. And when we get in the conservatory, where he has and he goes to something along the lines of, I for years I've been chasing or watching rats go through the maze, and the one way to kind of always beat it is just to go outside. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Just go to the end.
Yeah, exactly.
Go to the end of the maze.
There's no point in chasing them through the maze. The best way to catch them is draw them outside. Yeah. He does make an offer to Picard and his team that they can just give themselves up, allow the future to be taken over by the Borg, her to take La Sirena, and him to achieve his goal, and then they can go ahead and live their lives, was the offer?
Yeah.
I'm not too sure whether I believed the offer, though.
No.
It seems like an odd offer, because I can kind of see why he would be hunting them down with a whole army full of people, but I don't think I ever believed that he was going to take Picard into custody and then release him immediately afterwards. That just feel like an odd offer.
Yeah, no, it did. It didn't feel genuine, but I guess, I think it may have been, but then, the stakes are the stakes are high here, and I liked the bit between Picard and Soong where there's Soong's idea of a better future, and there's Picard's idea of a better future. That they're both fighting for very different reasons. One for a very personal reason with Soong, and one for a wider, more collective reason. So that was kind of that was nice. Again, I think with this show, it's like even on the recap coming into this episode, we see the reaction of Soong to the Borg Queen doing what she does to get the mercenaries and turning them into drones. Yeah. And yet here, that uncomfortable side of it,
it's gone.
It is gone, is not addressed. Does he still feel that, given that she's then gone and done it to like 100 other ex-soldiers, does that make him more comfortable, or is he just become comfortable with it because so many have been turned?
Yeah.
But I mean, ultimately, is there the nagging doubt in the back of his mind that maybe her offer to him isn't entirely true, given that she can do what she does and control it? So, and the other side of it was just the comedy length of time that takes place before he doesn't manage to kill Picard, but that to me was a little bit too long.
It's hide and seek, John. Hide and seek takes a long time, especially if somebody's got their home ground.
And also, when did he become a magician? Where he could kind of disappear. I was expecting he would be wearing a cloak and he would go, as he just suddenly disappeared after that explosion of the phaser.
Yeah.
So again, there were just elements there that I was just like, okay.
Well, actually, you have converted my thoughts now because you've recounted effectively what happened last episode with Soong. So his offer is genuine to Picard. He is going to capture him and free him afterwards because he doesn't trust or is concerned about what the Borg Queen did to her new drones.
That's the reason.
So
okay.
Put both of our points together, and I think we've come up with Soong. It does lead to my favourite line from the episode. Once again, Patrick Stewart and Brent Spiner together in a scene is fantastic.
Oh, yeah, it is.
But the line I absolutely loved was, "The promise of legacy reveals the rot underneath." What a beautifully delivered line. Really, really like that. This idea that all it takes is someone to promise you that your legacy will live on, and that dirt and the evil element of you rises to the surface. I love that. Really good.
Do anything. Exactly.
So this was a crux moment for me, right? So this for me was, and it was one of those where you just talked about it. We have always talked about how much we love Brett Spiner and Patrick Stewart being together. It's very much similar to when you put Q and Picard together. You get these great, very narrative-based kind of discussions, and like that can be kind of very highbrow and theoretical and the theology pulled in. I thought they might do this where it's like, do you know what? Yeah, if you go this route, you are thought about for a few minutes. If you come back to mine and we go to mine, you aren't, but you create, your legacy is your siblings and your children, because your name goes on to become the father of synthetics. And I am part synthetic, like is history. And then you pull in season 1 because you pull in his legacy of the synthetics. You pull in, because I thought what they were doing with that recap aspect where he looked at they showed the horror again of the simulation. Yeah. I thought they were going to go, that was the questioning moment. And he goes, she is going to just assimilate everyone. She's going to take domination. She is choosing violence. Yeah. You can choose peace. And by coming with me, you become the great grandfather of cybernetics, the great grandfather of synthetics. Beyond, look at these.
But they're not going to do that in episode 9 of the show, Chris. They have an episode left next week where he will confront Soong and most likely will have that conversation.
Agreed.
Oh God, true, actually,
Like, remember what we've been talking about the whole season of this show. Unfortunately, the one thing that we have all said we feel has let it down is that it spins the wheels when they could get to a resolution of the story to push it out a little bit. Yeah. This episode ends with them saying exactly what is left to accomplish in episode 10. Here's all the players on the board. This is what we need to do next week. And one of the things they say is, Soong's in the wind. I'm sure we'll see him again. So that is, I presume, they will get to have a confrontation with him. Okay. And the confrontation will be a meeting of minds.
I mean, the thing is, I prefer... And I'm totally on board with what you've said there. That hadn't even crossed my mind. But yeah, that counterpoint to his point on legacy, I think would have been really, really meaningful in terms of the next generation and season 1 and everything to do with that. I think that really makes sense, what you've said there, Chris. And I would have loved that. Instead, I guess the reason for it is now with the complication of there must be 2 Renes. And it's like, so what does that mean? So that we do have this split in the timeline. Maybe, so that there will be both the version of Soong that has the promise from the Borg Queen, because Rene has failed, and also the other timeline. I mean, I'm guessing, but the Soong that fails effectively, but we get data in the future and the legacy of that. So maybe that's the only reason why they didn't do that counterpoint, but that would be the obvious thing for Picard to say in that moment, because he doesn't know about this cryptic message that's just come from the Borg Queen. So I think it's just one of those things, but I'm totally with you. I absolutely love Brent Spiner and Patrick Stewart together.
Yeah.
It's just brilliant.
Yeah, really good.
Right, gentlemen, I think it's about time we finally move on to our main moments, our prime directive.
Mm-hmm. Yes, John, do you want to kick us off with yours?
Not particularly. I think I drew the short straw on what sort of big moment left to get, but it's the death of Picard's mother.
Maman!
Maman.
Oh no, Chris, don't do it.
No, exactly.
We were talking about this, that the way that kid says "maman" every time he speaks is so irritating. It's almost as irritating. Do you guys remember the movie The Hobbit, which had
yes,
the 3 movies The Hobbit, which had the kids who kept calling their da over and over again, and it was it went through your mind even more than Chris just went through my mind when he said that 3 times in a row. So Mama from this kid, as a reference to the fact that he's playing Picard, he's French, and it's the only word that he's clearly been taught to do it. It's not on the kid's performance. It's not on him. He's clearly been told this is something you have to say so that people recognize that you're Jean-Luc Picard, the French guy that lives in the chateau in France, right? So you have to say one French word. So this is the one you've got. Pronounce it as often as you possibly can. It's so irritating. But anyway, that's not your point. So we'll go back to your point, John.
But to that point, it's the scenes that he's given, because it's always looking for his mother. Mm-hmm. So he's calling out, but it's in this needy, weak way. And, this idea that Jean-Luc has these sort of connection issues and attachment issues, with his father and his mother. But it's just kind of grating, because we won't really see that play out. And I think to this point, I really just don't care that much about what happened to his mother here.
So bad,
I had no connection to the struggle that she was going through, the reasons for it, and quite frankly, just how that was impacting Jean-Luc as an adult or as a kid, other than he buried the memory, other than he throws a rock through the observatory window. So the death of Picard's mother here, interspersed the way it was, I liked some of that. I liked it happening in the background of the present day, where it connects him to say, hide and seek. This is how we can get away from the drones. I like those elements to it. Yes, we got an explanation of sorts, but it was so shallow in terms of what it delivered compared to what it should have done, given this is the series lead character with a seminal moment in his young life. And in the end, I just kind of didn't connect in with it at all. And even the idea, I'll bring you down to the tunnels because you're too overstimulated and, you know, the darkness and lack of windows will mean that you won't be. But like,
well, no.
I just, I didn't understand the fascination with the tunnels from her. I could understand it from Picard as a young kid, you know, World War II tunnels, really exciting. It's like your own den and all this kind of stuff.
And he's been told he could die 1,000 ways by his father down there. If he was a more adventurous seeming kid, you could kind of see that this would be this world where a maze and exciting for him to get down there. But he seems terrified of his father and seems terrified of the idea that his dad has told him he could die 1,000 ways down there. And his mother is not trying to do anything for Picard here. She's trying to encourage him to come down to this basement where she feels safe or feels secure. But you're right. It's the lightness of touch that's been given to this. They're trying to talk about mental health issues. They're trying to talk about the fact that his mother suffered these mental health issues. We heard it earlier on in the season when he was talking to Renee and trying to encourage her, even if you do suffer with these kind of issues, you can still go to greatness. That was a wonderful moment that we talked about with Picard earlier on in the season, but they are so light on their description of what actually is going on with his mother that you're right. I don't feel any connection to that storyline. I feel sad that it happened. Of course, it's a horrible thing for a kid of his age to walk in and see his mother who's hung herself. That's an awful thing to have happened, but it's just not, it just doesn't have any resonance in the show. And I think this week, and I'm not going to spoil the other show that we're covering, Moon Knight, this week we were dealing with a show that has a lot of mental issues being discussed throughout multiple episodes, and it's handled so well. All of us are brought to tears by some moments in that episode, particularly this week. But it doesn't feel like there's anything there. I think it's how they're structuring the slow release of the story over the course of 4 or 5 episodes. We've known something happened in this house and we've been trying to guess. We thought it was a bit more sci-fi. We thought something was going on that would connect into the wider storyline. And it's not connecting at all. And I think because Picard himself keeps pushing that story away every time anybody confronts him, Tallinn mostly confronts him about it, or he's confronted himself with the story. Because he keeps pushing it away, it feels so distant now that it was almost, this was the inevitable story that was going to be told, and it's been told way too slowly.
Yeah, way too slowly. I mean, actually, the one part of it where there was some kind of, I think, fresh feeling of it, and again, it's to the power of Patrick Stewart as an actor, was where, you know, he just simply says, she was ill, but I thought she was inspired. Yes. You know, that, you know, she was still his mother. He loved her. She was the one that would play with him, the hide and seek games, the looking up at the stars. And he was inspired by her, even though she was carrying these health issues. Yeah. And I thought that was the bit for me that felt most sort of deep and emotional. Yeah. But it just feels like it was too little around this whole storyline and how long it's been going on, to be honest. Because all I feel this storyline boils down to is the two of them running through dark tunnels and him getting his foot caught in rotten wood. And it's dreadful to say, and I know it's more than that. Yeah. But ultimately, I'm finding it very difficult just to kind of get past that.
Yeah, so for me, I'm going to jump in on this part now here. The really interesting part of the storyline for me was the introduction of his father as a psychiatrist, James Callis from Battlestar Galactica. It was fun to see that episode. And that storyline part was great. And then the very short flashback of kind of hide and seek, that was a nice kind of touch. This final reveal, the problem I have is how it impacts the greater storyline right now. I.e., the death of his mother, or him causing in his mind, by opening that door, the death of his mother, or allowing her, because his father was keeping her locked in for her safety, and by Jean-Luc opening it with that key, he then causes the death of his mother, then inadvertently causing the death of his mother by opening that door and letting her out. How does that impact the greater history and storyline of this season by kind of what is the crux of like how it saves Jurati? I was expecting like it saves Jurati, Renee, or something to kind of become opening, or was it simply that by that key now, that skeleton key that drops, does he now have that, and because he has that, he then hides it, removes it off the board, and then that key is no longer there as a skeleton key, so therefore Jean-Luc in the future no longer has that key to open the door and cannot let his mother out. It like, maybe that's what they're going to go with. And then that's, therefore, it's like he saved his mother by reliving that historic tragedy in the past.
Maybe.
Cool. It's just that reveal, it's not like open to that we knew, it's just that death scene, unfortunately, just doesn't pay a pivotal moment. It just, it plays the moment for sadness and for Jean-Luc and seeing Sir Patrick Stewart say some of these lines and relive that aspect as just only Jean-Luc can, as Sir Patrick Stewart can. But for a story beat, I don't see how it impacts the story.
Right. Well, basically, this is coming back all the way back to the first episode of the season. Remember, the storyline of Picard, before any of the challenge came in from Q or the attack from the Borg on the ship that destroyed all of the ships that were out there, the issue for Picard was his age and the fact that he's never been in love in his life.
Yeah.
And this is the resolution to that storyline. The conversation he has with Tallinn after he has the final memory of his mother, the repressed memory, as he says himself, the one thing that he's forced himself to forget over the years is because he loved her so much and couldn't believe that she was so damaged, because exactly to the quote that John was talking about, he believed she was amazing, even though she was so damaged she took her own life.
Yeah.
And Tallinn is the one that gives closure to that storyline for Picard. She tells him, no matter what, no matter how painful it is, no matter how wonderful it is, no matter how short-lived it is, love is always great.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's that moment where he's supposed to now move on with his life, move on with his ability to love. When he gets back to his present day, he will be able to go and talk to the woman that he loves and finally start a relationship with her after moving on from this. That's what's supposed to be here. But again, as we said, this has taken so long that, as you say, Chris, you've been watching this episode and podcasting on this show all the way through, and you couldn't make that connection with that storyline because it's going on for 9 episodes trying to reveal it. That we're not seeing that connection back to the first episode, because what we're expecting in the show like this is they've time traveled across the galaxy, and we're expecting a storyline here that's resolving what's happened in the creation of the Confederation. We're expecting these bigger storylines to be talked about or discussed, and what we're actually getting here in the biggest part of this episode is a resolution to something that's in the back of our minds, maybe from episode 1.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So the thing on this, right? Do you know how you close that? You close that with, "You're right. I need to tell the woman I love that I love her too." Boom. Done. And then we all go, "Oh my God, he's going to tell Lars that he actually loves her too." And that's how you pull it back. Because you're right. That is probably pulling all the way back to that.
Yeah.
But the unfortunate aspect of just having it at the central crux moment is it just this, as again, we podcast on a weekly basis based on what we're given in that week. And then at the end of the season, we kind of look back as a whole. Based on what we got here, it feels out of place. That's the problem. It feels that it's just resolving something that unresolved or has no need to be resolved.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I think it's to the point of the number of spinning plates.
yeah,
In that there's so many things have happened, and this is just one more, and you're like, well, how is this connecting? How, does that mean we're going to get back to, 400 years into the future, and we're going to get that scene at Chateau Picard between Picard and Laris, but there's still Q. There's now this double Rene situation. There's still Soong on the table. There's still Teresa on the table. And there's still the situation that happens with the Borg coming through. Yeah. And it's kind of like, they've just done too many threads throughout this series. Yeah. And some of them have gotten diluted for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's fair.
And simply the fact that Tallinn, and we saw in the preview, after Tallinn was inside Picard's mind, she's the one that pointed out that Q wanted him to relive these memories for some reason. There's part of that story. We're going to put a pin in it. We'll come back to it later. They've come back to it later. And this is connected into whether Picard can love or not. Not to resolving the threat of Q, not to resolving the possibility of the Confederation, not to resolving anything else that I can see. I can't see him coming in next episode and going, Q, if you just loved a little more, then we won't have this situation. Or Soong, if you just found more love, then we wouldn't be in this situation and we can all go back and live our lives and the world will survive. I just can't see this playing in other than to the basic storyline of Picard from episode 1.
So basically it's going to come into Jean-Luc Picard singing as John Lennon to going, love is all you need. Love. That's Paul McCartney.
That's Paul McCartney.
It's even worse. Wow. Hey, one Englishman to another. It's fine. I'm going to jump in here. I'm going to move into our kind of one of the next points because it's a small one, but it actually has kind of a larger impact, but it will feed directly into Derrick's kind of main point for this, which is Annika is no more again. We have lost, we gained Annika and we've lost Annika. She is now reassimilated, not technically as the way that she, not by choice, which is what Jurati has said that the new Borg will do. To save her life, she is reassimilated. She has become Borg again. And it's an interesting bit because we hear throughout this season so far that she feels human again. Because she was the president of the Confederation, she never had any of those implants, so she has none of those extrasensory Borg capabilities that she grew up with as a child since when she was assimilated as a kid years ago. So it's interesting to see towards the end of this that she is kind of so quick in accepting back. And I suppose it is that kind of, it's like she's unhappy about it, because you do see Picard straight as he speaks to her. He goes, "Oh, Seven, I'm so sorry." Because you can see she has her kind of, her eyepieces back and things. I can't tell. I didn't look deep enough to see if there was any slight differences, because of the difference in technology of assimilation and things like that. But didn't look like anything too major. It looked very much like 7 of 9. As we've seen her now. Sorry, I should say, as we've seen her throughout this season, or last season and the beginning of this season.
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused on this, to be honest, and just because there's so much going on, and I'm not 100% sure what they've done to Annika, and we mentioned it last week that the show seems to be trying to push you to call her Annika. She is completely human, has no connection with the Borg, had never got that because of the path that she went through in this timeline. And then here she's turned back into 7. So I don't think she's part of the Borg collective. I think they've restored her to where she was as being an ex-Borg.
Yes.
Yeah, but not part of the collective, because remember, Jurati takes the ship and it goes on off to the Delta Quadrant. So if she was part of the collective, she'd be on that ship going with them, is what I think. So I think she fixes her back up And the price for that is that she has to now look like an ex-Borg. She has to go back to having those implants, but she's not part of the Borg collective here. That's one of the things. But I do love, once again, I mentioned earlier on about Raffi's moment with her, where she's convincing her that she needs to accept this part of her life.
Yeah.
She has been challenged her whole life because she was added to the collective so young. She was added at such a young age. Interestingly here, I don't think I'd ever heard this story before, where Seven says that she did actually apply for Starfleet. Raffi's telling her she'd make an amazing captain, and she says that she did apply, but they didn't want her involved because of her Borg connection. It makes her more susceptible to Borg attacks, effectively. And even Captain Janeway, her former captain on the Voyager, stepped up and said that she would leave the Federation if she wasn't accepted back into it. But she chose to go off and join the Fenric Rangers because they still wouldn't accept her to Starfleet. I thought that was a really interesting storyline. I'd love to have heard a bit more about that.
I liked that little piece, actually. I thought it was really good, just because of having, the idea of why she is that full-blown Ranger, and I love the little reference to Janeway, coming in, really batting for her, to try and get her into the Federation, and that she tried. So, I really like that little piece here. I like Raffi's piece as well, of, saying that she has to accept this side of it. So I thought that was really good. I would agree. I don't think she's not in the collective. She's not assimilated. I think
she has nanites again in her body.
I just couldn't.
She's restored.
I didn't know what to say in the synopsis, so I just said she's assimilated, but she's definitely kind of been sort of moved to the 7 of 9 that we know. So I mean, I'm glad she was saved as well. She's a great character, and I'm glad that the Borgatti decided to come in and do that, with Agnes laying out a new path for the Borg Queen.
So perfect segue. So let's move into the major kind of ending, the major episode, the creation of this new Borg Queen, 400 years earlier than ever before, outside of the Delta Quadrant. And it is what we have kind of said for a while. It was going to be Jurati. It is Borgatti.
It was inevitable. Absolutely. Yeah. My main moment for the episode is Jurati, and the deal with the Borg Queen, because it is a new Borg, that effectively has been created here, and completely diffuses the greatest villain in Star Trek, effectively. If Jurati's going off and created the Borg from scratch in the Delta Quadrant 400 years before Voyager meet them, or 400 years before Q brings them in contact with the Enterprise, effectively, they're going to be really different. They're effectively going to be going through the galaxy looking for ships that are in trouble, or with people who are dying aboard, and asking them, do they want to be saved and join the collective and create this alliance of species across the galaxy to work together for the betterment of the galaxy. Really interesting concept.
But does it nullify the greatest enemy? Because do you take a Back to the Future line on time travel, or an MCU? So it has happened. So it still happens.
I know it's really hard because we don't have the final episode here, but we do hear the Borg Queen saying there will be no need for a Borg killer in the future, because we're going to be doing this. We're going to be helping people, not killing species.
Agreed.
So the final line that we're left with, this one of to succeed there must be 2 Renes, one lives and one dies. Again, we've been speculating throughout the episode that means there will be 2 timelines created, but I really have no idea. That line was like, okay, fine, I guess we'll find out next week. Because even Picard's reaction to it was, I won't accept an outcome of something that hasn't already happened. They're kind of going, but you've come back in time, so has it already happened or not? I don't know. We'll find out next week on that. But in here, this arrangement that's made between Jurati and the Borg Queen, that they will now go out and seek out new life, seek out other
new
civilizations to join with a collective where they're willing participants in the betterment of this new society.
Yeah.
I think it's really, really cool. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah.
But it's such a change from what we know from the Borg in the past. I'm not too sure about Jurati's insistence that the reason why the Borg are the way they are is because the Borg Queen is lonely. I thought that was a little bit heavy-handed to try and stuff it into Jurati's storyline, because I thought the Borg Queen was effectively the central computer, the CPU of the Borg.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was a person at the center that was trying to form a collective around themselves because they were lonely. I'm just not too sure whether that came across very well for me. But overall, I love the idea of convincing the Borg Queen that actually there's a different way to achieve what you're doing and create this amazing assimilated society that all want to work together and all add their unique distinctiveness to the collective to make it better. I love that idea.
Yeah, me too. This for me was just what I was coming to this episode for. I absolutely loved it. I think it's a really neat resolution to the Jurati and the Borg Queen. I liked how that's portrayed when they're speaking to one another again.
Yeah.
And I just liked, I liked Jurati's response to, trying to save Seven, because we have the Borg Queen trying to effectively finish her off with, killing her.
Yeah.
I liked the notion that Seven was the best of you.
Yeah.
Yes.
And, and now you're trying to kill her. And I think I know what you mean about trying to connect too much Jurati and the Borg Queen in terms of similar motivations.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, to me, it's always, it's that they are different. And so I've I didn't really link it too much as to what you said, but I agree. It's a little heavy-handed, but for me, this is the humanity of Jurati saying, rather than assimilate its salvation, it's rather than giving no choice, give them that choice to be saved, and give it to people who have few options in their life, that where they are able to make that choice. And I liked that it was the counter to the Borg Queen saying about organics where, fear and love, and it's creatures without love that are powerful, the creatures without fear that are conquerors. And so I felt that it did go a little wider than just linking Jurati and her loneliness to the Queen's loneliness. Because the Queen's loneliness here is a result of the Confederation. So there is that side of it, but I just felt I liked this idea that in getting into her mind, maybe the reason why we hadn't seen as much Jurati coming out, whilst the Borg Queen's been doing her thing, that she has been rummaging around, the folders in her CPU brain.
Exactly.
To go, actually, your outcomes always end in your destruction, primarily, or neutering, because, you force people. You don't have, ultimately, your organization of the collective is akin to Soviet Russia rather than pure collective action, where it's willing and being forced into.
And this kind of resolves the Borg storyline now. So Jurati's now off in the Delta Quadrant 400 years before the Borg were created, or at least a couple of hundred years before the Borg were created. So that's the Borg storyline done.
Yeah.
We know how that really resolves because Jurati's standing aboard the Stargazer in episode 1 of this season. So we know that where that storyline goes. So I presume we're not seeing Borgati or Jurati and the Borg next episode. So now they just have to resolve what's going on with Renee and what's going on with Q in the next episode, I guess.
What's going on with Renee and what's going on with dead Renee?
Exactly.
What's going on with live Q and dead Q?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be really intriguing to see.
Yeah. Any notes about the episode that we haven't talked about? Anything we haven't discussed on the episode? as we've gone through our major points?
Just very much that this potentially gives an actual definitive creation for the Borg. There has never been an agreed canonical origin of the Borg.
Exactly.
Guinan said that they've been around for thousands of years. There's been hints and kind of theories out there about, it goes all the way back to like the one of the first Star Trek films, and being sucked into a black hole. It's never just directly been stated. So this actually gives an origin to the Borg, which is interesting. And
a very different type of Borg than we've seen in the other shows, though. Or is this, the intent is that it's supposed to go out and help save people, and then at some point it does change back to the evil Borg in the future. Is that the way? But I don't think it will.
I don't know. Yeah.
Any notes from yourself, John?
Not really. The only thing I've said, Borgatti. I just posit maybe Jorg as well. Could be another sort of.
Oh no! Here comes the Jorg. It's a bit too Swedish, chef. Jorgy Borgy. Oh no, the Jorgy Borgy are coming. Oh no.
But that's my only note.
Jorg. Okay.
Yes, the J from Jurassic. With Org.
I got it.
Okay, damn. just checking.
Well, wasn't that difficult. The only one I wanted to just call out, because we didn't in the episode, the plan from Seven, when she took back the transporters and took back control of the ship from the emergency combat hologram of Elnor. Wow, brutal plan. Like, these guys were literally just turned in to Borg Jones last episode, and her plan was to transport them into the walls of the chateau. She's literally embedding them in the walls of the chateau, not transport them a couple of 100 miles away off to LA from France or something. It was literally transport them into the walls of the chateau.
Well, that's it. Can you imagine the decorators when they were coming to do up Chateau Picard for Jean-Luc, and
what are all these skeletons stuck in the wall,
just hanging out the wall?
Did you build this wall around these people? Because they wouldn't have seen transporters, you know?
Nope.
Interesting.
Nope. Yeah, definitely. But gentlemen, I think that's the end of our notes. So should we do this? Let's get straight into it. John, what did you think of Star Trek Picard episode 209, Hide and Seek?
Do you know, I thought it was really better, despite being relatively a bit negative in parts on this. I thought this was much better than episode 8. So I actually would give this 3.5 fractal Elnors out of 5. I loved the fractal Elnor, the holographic Elnor. I loved the whole storyline, the intriguing sort of deal that Jurati does with the Borg Queen. I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed 7 of 9, so Annika's journey here. I really enjoyed Raffi's moment with Elnor, but there were just parts of it where I was like, I just couldn't kind of summon the will to just connect it into the rest of the series around Rios, around Picard's mother, and I think it's actually having an effect on the overall kind of episode for me, that it's just not fitting for me. And, you know, trying to think back to episode 1 with that moment in the chateau, and then now, and again, I mean, we, you know, quite often we say, how are they going to resolve this in the final episode? I think for me, this is genuinely one moment where I'm saying, how on earth are they going to cover this off without doing a Lord of the Rings ending on it? You know, I mean, they've effectively just created a whole new story of a Rennie that works and a Rennie that doesn't, ultimately. And
it sounds like you're having some indigestion problems.
I know, exactly. Plus, just the simple fact of, how are they going to get anywhere? Because the ship's gone. And so what, you know, I guess they'll just pull out some kind of device from Tallinn's top drawer in her apartment. But, I mean, again,
she is a space traveler.
It is just, when you've got a 10-episode series, I just think some of this stuff could have happened much earlier.
Absolutely.
So you get an ending. So unfortunately, it just colours this episode for me. But nonetheless, I do feel that it's better than episode 8. So I give it 3.5 fractal Elnors out of 5. I think before this, I was just going to give it a 50-50 of 2.5. But I think with the discussion, there's certain elements that have, I did enjoy that, discussing it, thinking about it. But this was close, to a non-defend, if we think, ultimately.
Okay. Yeah. Derrick, what about yourself? What did you think of Hide and Seek?
I thought the episode was great. I think I'm a bit worn down by the series, though. At this stage, there's really only been one episode of the season that I didn't like, and that was episode 7, and that was mostly because of how it trapped them in another loop of another thing going round. And I think, to your point, John, normally when we get to the end of the season, when we get to this penultimate episode, we go, how is this going to resolve next week? And because we know there is a third season coming and there's going to be loads of cameos from lots of people from Next Generation, that's off the table for me right now, because I know they've still got another 11 episodes to go. So they don't have to resolve everything next week. They can put a cliffhanger in the middle of it, because we know they've filmed a third season, and they can absolutely just roll it over into the next season and have that as the next storyline. Unfortunately, I just think I liked this particular episode. I don't really like doing reviews of episodes as we go. I like kind of getting a whole idea of the season overall. This episode had some great moments in it, had a couple of things I'm not particularly happy with, but overall, 9 episodes into the season, it feels like that some of these storylines have dragged so much that their impact has been lost when we get to here. All good reveals, all good storylines, but it feels like we should have hit this part of the episodes earlier on in the season and had loads of other stories and adventures with the characters we really like in this show. So right now, I give a high rating to the episode. I think it's worth watching, but I'm happy that we're getting to the end of the season next week. How about yourself, Chris?
Yeah, I can't add much more to what you guys have already said. I'm in agreement. It's a good episode. Middling to it's a good middling to great, but as a season it is starting to drag, and I do feel, as you have said, we know there's a season 3. I believe we're going to get an Empire Strikes Back style ending. I believe they're going to leave us with a somewhat kind of down on their luck. How do they get out of this ending for everyone's still stuck? Either stuck back in time, or they go back to the future and it is not what they want and everything's bad. I think that's where we end. I think we will end up just also losing some story threads. They may end up, the emotional impact they wanted, which again, no one sets out to write a storyline that isn't impactful. No one sets out to write a bad piece of TV or bad script or anything like that. It just sometimes happens when you end up pushing this out. So I do believe there's going to be some resolutions next season. I think also there's going to be there was the impact of COVID. And it's noticeable on a lot of aspects of this season, this show, and even this episode, where you had hundreds of, well, not hundreds, so where we had 20s. We had at least in the high 10s of people, soldiers being put in, and then we saw 3 of them get transported into the wall, and then there was still 2 on the ship. Like, there was not that many overall, but that's again just COVID aspects. So interesting enough. I'm looking forward to see how they resolve this, and I'm worried right now. In the last 40 to 58 minutes of the show itself for this season, how much we get resolution-wise. The
blame really has to be on production, doesn't it? And the studio, Paramount, because
I think so.
There had to have become a point during filming of this show where restrictions were so tight and the production had been delayed so much that they had a decision to make. Either we go ahead and film this, or we stop production like every other production has done out there. And they decided to push the pedal to the metal and go ahead and film what they could at this time and restrict their creativity and pull things back and change storylines so that they could film with 3 people instead of having bigger scenes. so that they could meet a production deadline. And it's so noticeable. We've seen loads of shows now. There's loads of shows that were filmed during this period. Or a little later, maybe a month or two later, that are now out. There's movies that are in the cinema that have been filmed during this period. And none of them have felt so much like, as you said, John, when we were watching those moments with Rios where you're going, well, clearly he's in a bubble with those three people, and they live together and they work together, so they have to do something to write Rios back into the bubble with those other two people so that he doesn't infect anybody with COVID, because that's what they were all worried about at this particular moment in time. And it's so noticeable that you just go, should you have filmed it or should you have gone, this is such a premium that we have Patrick Stewart back on board for a Star Trek season. Maybe we should hold off on filming Star Trek Picard for a couple more months and see if restrictions ease. And it just feels like they push through and the end product is cheapened because of it.
Yeah, unfortunately so. So anyway. Let us all, let's head to 10 forward and raise a glass to what could have been, what is instead, with the one and only 10 forward pub quiz. John, take it away.
Yes, fellow quizzers, fellow Trekkies, 10 forward pub quiz. Question 9. In Chateau Picard, as Raffi and Seven prepare to storm La Sirena, what 3 weapons do they have to take on the dozen Borg drones that stand in their way?
Excellent. And representative weapons, let's say.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a good scene. Check it out. Write down the answers. Email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com with all the answers for all the questions for the season. You'll be in with a chance to win some Picard goodies. John, do you want to give the question one more time?
Certainly. In Chateau Picard, as Raffi and Seven prepare to storm La Sirena, what 3 weapons do they have to take on the dozen Borg drones that stand in their way?
Excellent. We got on to some feedback, guys.
Yes, let us boldly go. Where we go on every podcast to the feedback section.
Aren't we really lucky?
We are, absolutely.
Yes, if you would like to send us feedback to for this episode, or well, actually for the next episode and the season in general, don't forget you can send it to feedback@TV Podcast Industries and we will read it out. You can also get your voice on the air by recording a quick clip of your thoughts and emailing it to feedback@TV Podcast Industries, or head on over to our website where you can record up to 90 seconds of your thoughts for the season at tvpodcastindustries.com. We have our first email for this episode, and it's from the one and only Victor Von Doom, who had this to say. Greetings, Trekkies. Finally, a plot-moving and action-filled episode. Picard chose a wrong time to have a therapy interlude, but Q forced the issues. Why is there no mention of Picard's older brother, Robert? I know they were not close, so perhaps Picard blocked him from memory? The story of his mother was most tragic. The acting muscle in this episode is prevalent. Brent Spiner, Sir Patrick, and all the rest are on fire. Seven regaining her Borg implants was a bit sad, but would she not have them upon returning to the future? Raffi seeing Elnor's hologram must have been joyous and painful, although nice to see him in action. I cheered when he found his sword. The Queen and Jurati confrontations were also gripping. Despite a kinder, gentler Borg emerging, I would like to see Q and the Borg finally put to bed soon. What was meant by the Queen Jurati's message to Picard? Perhaps Q could be of some use. Waiting to see how 2 Renees will come about. Eagerly awaiting the season finale, TVPI podcast, and Trekkie's feedback. Peace and love, Victor Von Doom.
Thanks, Victor.
Yes, thank you so much, Victor. And yeah, I think we're all eagerly awaiting the season finale.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I think there was a mention of Robert Picard back in the first time we had Picard talking to his mom. She was saying that the father is off planet. I think she said Robert was away in school or away in college. So it's just the two of them alone together in Chateau Picard. I think that's the only mention we've had of Picard's brother. It was just a kind of offhand comment. So he's probably still away in boarding school or still away in college or something like that. I think that's all we have about him.
Yeah. And I think, the the Bugatti's message to Picard is anyone's guess. We'll see how that plays out in the next episode. And yes, I'm with you on the sword find by Elnor.
Very cool.
I kind of wanted to do a Knight of the Round Table type, lofting the swords up in cheer with Elnor.
Very cool. It's very cool.
Yeah, kind of like that, but maybe not so Hazari.
Thanks so much, Victor. Good to hear from
Victor.
you. We have some Facebook feedback as well. We got some feedback from Richard Blaze, who says, I completely agree with John from last week's podcast and feel there are far too many threads that are being drawn out just to ensure the series can hit the 10 episode mark. Maybe COVID did have a far bigger impact than we could imagine. Series 2 is like that difficult second album. You follow an artist and like their work and are eager for every morsel of new music. When you listen to their debut album, you realize most of them are killer tracks with few filler thrown in. Then the second album hits. It's rushed and comes quickly, and listening to it you realize it's the total opposite. Mostly filler tracks with the odd killer, the singles you are familiar with. And you long for the third album to reach the dizzy heights you know they can achieve before they implode into the inevitable drug-fueled breakup and bitter legal wrangling of who created what. Anyhow, latest episode feels like a huge jump from previous weeks. Suddenly Jurati has an army. Last week she had a few generic butch humans in black, which, as all good movie buffs know, denotes special forces. Now she has enough of them to surround the vineyard. The Borg Queen's plan makes real sense now with the throwaway line about the Confederation. That's all she knows in this universe, and she wants to prevent it. If they were to play with this, you'd feel more sympathy for her, and you could almost reason it. She doesn't want that future too, but it's just cast aside and almost makes her feel like a generic big bad of the series, something I've never felt about the Borg. The rest of the episode plays out like a typical penultimate episode. Familiar faces saying they may not survive, a hero trying to do some doo-wop thing to save their friends, a pretend bad guy offering to talk, links back to what's been teased in previous episodes, the big bad hardly appearing to allow for the grand entrance and to carry the big finale. Interrupted exposition, pretend big bad walking slowly to camera, the forced return of a character who left, died in an earlier episode or earlier season. The line, whatever you're doing, do it faster.
Oh my god.
When one main character is injured severely, another main character is only injured in a minor way, despite the fact they both should have been injured severely in the original way. The big bad being persuaded not to go through with their final maniacal plan due to them being reasoned with, main characters being in danger, but mysteriously time is drawn out so they survive. Tears. Maybe I'm just being too harsh in this series. Bad Star Trek is better than no Star Trek, but really think they missed an opportunity to look at Picard's new role in the universe after the end of Series 1 and what the synthetics role could now be and how they could become accepted again to move the Federation forward. Maybe even getting closer to what happened in Discovery Season 3. Or was that in a different timeline? The story about Picard's mum at the end is really strong, and I'm glad it was just life and not anything to do with them bringing anything back from the future. It's a child's view and the making of who he was to become, and I thought it was a real highlight of this series. I'll bet it didn't need the horror atmosphere built around it at the beginning. Jurati/Borg, I'm not buying it. It feels as a character, she's the one who's been really shortchanged. Making her join with the Borg makes them seem really easy to defeat and robs her of her individuality. I wanted redemption from her and acceptance of who she is. This feels like she's still running away. On the plus side, I stayed awake during the episode.
Thank you so much, Richard. I absolutely loved the your breakdown and your thoughts of how this was essentially a band and an album. I think really are. It is the second album, and we know we're getting this third one. We know it is going to be the dizzying heights before the inevitable drug-fueled breakup. And I love that one. I really want to see Patrick Stewart on mushrooms. I think it would just be amazing.
Interesting.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. And I really actually get what you're saying about the synthetic angle here. Like it's almost been ignored.
Yeah, totally.
Or awkwardly discussed. And you think actually they could have built the second season around that, with the Borg and with Q, but just had this more of, a much more central thing, because even though I've liked Issa Briones, when she's been in this series, ultimately that huge character central character, along with Picard, has been reduced to just almost cameo moments and throughout this whole series. And I think that's kind of, I guess, interesting. I can connect in with what you're saying there for sure.
Yeah, it's what's been happening throughout the series. Oh, Issa Briones lives in wherever she lives and we film in California. We only get 2 days with her because of COVID restrictions. So how can we write her into the story for those 2 days? That's how this whole season has felt, unfortunately. But great thoughts, Richard. One more episode to go in this season. Let's hope there's a big uptick in quality in season 3, or a big uptick in what they want to accomplish with this show when they have one final opportunity to have Patrick Stewart playing this role of Jean-Luc Picard in one final season.
Of course, we're going to get the Riker maneuver. We get a Klingon. It's going to be amazing.
I'm not going to anticipate, Chris, what they're going to write next season. I tried that this season. I'm consistently surprised at what we're getting. Let's say that.
Yep, thanks again, Richard. Heather Wallace says, am I expecting too much in hoping that the storyline of Picard's mother has some bearing in the finale? Maybe the understanding Picard has gained will help convince Q of something. Otherwise, it's been an emotional storyline that showcases Patrick Stewart's acting and gave a good guest role for James Callis, but added nothing to the plot. It was good to see Elnor, albeit in holographic form. I did wonder at the practicality of giving secret information to a simulation of the crew member with absolute candor. I'm sure the Queen would have created a situation where he had to give it up out of honesty. Also, not sure why the soldiers were firing bullets at a light-based hologram. Maybe they were trying to destroy the mobile holo emitter. I promised myself I wouldn't comment on Rios' romantic subplot, so this is me being quiet about it, but please give him something great to do in the finale. Thank you so much, Heather, and what a great catch there about giving the information to Elnor and his absolute candor. It seems as though maybe she could switch that off with the fractal holographic Elnor that we get, but that is a good point.
But wouldn't that be great writing, though?
Yeah.
Agnes Strati is inside the Borg. The Borg Queen knows everything about all of these crew members, so she does convince this version of Elnor to give up the key because
definitely
she knows all about him. Wouldn't that be great writing, to be able to actually incorporate that into the show? Yeah, rather than stab through holo emitter and cancel the emergency combat hologram.
Definitely. Although even just that classic, moment where Strati tells the Borg Queen about the whole fractal key and the hologram, and then makes the hologram appear. So that was also a bit of like, this is what I've done to stall you. Instead of you having to try and figure it out in my own mind, I'm going to actually just lay it out to you and also invite said fractal key directly into your presence. Yeah. So again, it's one of those crazy sort of bad guy things, isn't it? I guess that happens where they lay it all out in a sense. Although in this case, it's
the good guy. That's the twist. That's the twist.
Telling the bad Borg, here's what I've done to stop you.
Yeah.
Oh, and here's the thing. Now go after it.
Thank you so much, Heather. We have one final piece of feedback from Joe Herbers, who had this to say. This season started out promising, and while it's still better than season 1, it's been disappointing overall. The serialized approach of new Star Trek just isn't working out. Filming was long delayed due to the pandemic, so they said they had time to rewrite. Maybe they shouldn't have.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I think we're all coming to that realization. I think everyone, and again, we all love Star Trek. We're all Trekkers, Trekkies, and everything in between. And I think I think we're all starting to see some of the cracks due to the pandemic. But overall, hey, look, I think many people have said it. Any Star Trek is better than no Star Trek, and I'm happy for it here sometimes.
But as I say, it's starting to cheapen what they could have had available by pushing through with Picard. Like Star Trek Discovery, loads of great episodes, loads of great seasons of that show. Star Trek Lower Decks is a great show, really fun version of Star Trek. There's Star Trek Strange New Worlds coming out for US residents next week.
Amazing.
Unfortunately, we won't get that until later in the year because of bloody Paramount again. But there is loads of great weekly serialized Star Trek out there. And yeah, it's unfortunate that Picard has suffered, I feel, the most from how it's been produced. We've got one more episode to go. I feel if we keep talking about this show as we've been talking about it, we're going to get more and more frustrated at the way it's been delivered. So thanks to all of our wonderful fellow Trekkies for their feedback for the episode. Stick with us. One more episode to go. We're all crossing fingers. It's going to be a great season finale when it comes out next week. Thanks so much for joining with us. This episode of TV Podcast Industries was brought to you by our supporters over on Patreon and all of our supporters for the podcast, including Anthony Ostler. Thanks so much, Anthony, for your support over on Patreon.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony.
Yeah, appreciate it, Anthony. And if you'd like to support us for a monthly amount, you can head on over to patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries. Or if you'd like to support us with a one-off donation, you can pop on over to buymeacoffee.com/TVPI and buy our illustrious Commander-in-Chief, our number one, a coffee. Yes, Derrick.
Yes, we will be back next week with Star Trek Picard Season 2 finale, along with your feedback on the show and the final question for our 10 Forward pub quiz. So please make sure you join us, fellow Trekkies.
And next week, we'll be concluding our podcast about Marvel's Moon Knight, starring Oscar Isaac. And maybe a third Oscar Isaac. Who knows? Yes, the final episode comes out on May 4th on Disney+, so make sure you join us next week for that. But for now, fellow Trekkies, Trekkers, thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you so much, fellow Trekkies, for joining us. As always, it's great chatting about Star Trek Picard, even if it is a little frustrating from time to time. But remember, keep watching, keep listening, and keep trekking.
Bye.
Bye.